Okay, so hi, I'm Anna. I'm from Rochester Institute of Technology, and I teach in the MFA Visual Communication Design, which is the graphic design graduate program. Most of my students are international, and most of them have no background in graphic design. So they are like engineers and journalists, and they're coming to RIT to change their careers, starting design school for this really compressed 2-year program. And on the first day of class, I like to ask them what they think the hardest part about being or becoming a graphic designer is. And usually they tell me, almost everybody in the room will say, coming up with ideas is the hardest part. And there's this myth that an artist or a designer has to wait for divine inspiration to strike, which isn't true. We just have to design strategies for ourselves and some techniques to use in order to be creative. And that's what I'm really passionate about teaching. So today I'm going to share with you a case study of one project that I designed called Mining for Ideas that I taught this past semester to my graduate students at RIT. And first I'll share 3 inspiration precedent things that led to the design of this project. The first is my experience as a graphic designer. I'm a book cover designer. I explore the intersection of type and image, and I have anxiety about the blank page and not being able to come up with ideas. And so over the 20 years that I've been a graphic designer, I have developed a bunch of ideation and iteration strategies that are these really specific morphologies that I can lean on during my process so that I never have to fear coming up with an idea. I always know what to do next because I've designed these strategies for myself. So that's part of what I teach. And then also the Surrealists movement, exquisite corpse drawing game. I find a lot of inspiration from this idea of collaborative form generation and surprise. And it's a great way to force an artist to relinquish some control where you're completing part of a drawing, but you can't see the other third or fourth of it because the paper is folded. So this idea about auto generation and collaboration is really interesting to me. And then there are 2 designers, Skolos and Wedell, Nancy Skolos and Thomas Wedell, American designers who are known for their poster design. They also explore type and image, and they're teachers, and they have for the past 20 years or so taught this collage workshop all around the world where they teach people how to design posters starting from a collage, and they've written several books. So their research is tied into this project as well. In their collage workshop, they have participants cut up a magazine, tape together a collage, and then take that collage and use it as a pretty, A to B structure, grid structure to then become a poster. And this is really innovative in graphic design because usually we work from content to form, and Skolos-Wedell presents the possibility of working from form to content, which is really freeing for a designer. So this project that I'm going to share with you today, Mining for Ideas, is an intersection of all 3 of these things: my experience, Skolos-Wedell's research, and then the inspiration from the exquisite corpse and the surrealists. So the project starts with an ideation phase, and I do this on the first day of class as a kickoff workshop. Everybody gets a 13 by 19-inch piece of paper, big piece of cardstock, and then a bag with a different art supply in it. And I pull art supplies from my studio, all sorts of random stuff. We sit around a big table, and I set my timer on my phone for 2 minutes. And the task is each student has to alter their piece of paper with the materials or art supplies in their bag, only using what's in their bag. They've got 2 minutes to do it, alter the paper in some way. And when my timer goes off and that 2 minutes is over, they stop. And then we pass our papers to the right. And we repeat this every 2 minutes, pass the papers to the right, so that over the course of the class period, each student alters each individual sheet of paper. And it's really fun. It gets messy, and I have music playing, and it's the first day of class, so some students are meeting each other for the first time, and it's a great icebreaker. It just makes everybody get excited and relaxed. The results are really weird too, because they get sculptural. I asked the students to take this pliable plane and cut it and fold it and turn it into these sculptural objects. And like an exquisite corpse drawing, the collaborative nature of it makes these very grotesque, surprising forms that are weird and beautiful and just absolutely impossible to make as an individual. Really rely on the collaborative gamification of this process. So then at the end of this, we sit around and we're looking at these weird sculptural things, and the students like, okay, what was the point of that? So I show them the next step, which is we look at these really closely. And I've purposely designed my selection of art supply bags so that they're stacked with all the design elements that we need as graphic designers. There's typography, there's image, there's various line threads and drawing tools, there's elements of texture and pattern and color, so that every one of these collage sculptures has a wide assortment of design elements. And then I pull a photograph or a scan of one of them into Photoshop, and I show the students how I can zoom in really closely, and like I'm a miner going underground looking for gems, I can kind of chip away at this collage and search through every little portion of it and identify some exciting, interesting moments, like maybe where the type and the pattern interact, or maybe there's an interesting structure that could be used for a layout. And we mine through these images and take screenshots of all these little gems that we find. And each student then goes and does that for their collage that they get to take from that exercise. So here the student has selected 20 little gems of ideas that came from that original piece of paper. And then I asked them to look at each of those little gems of an idea and associate words, make an associative, intuitive word list about ideas, concepts, themes that this image makes them think of. And at this point, I tell them, okay, we're actually going to turn this into a real assignment now. We're going to design a poster series for a cultural event. And I asked them to, as homework, make 3 mood boards, come up with 3 visual directions for a poster series for a cultural event that is inspired by the collage crop that they've selected from that mining process. And then the next class they come to, I introduce them to a whole bunch of context. So I introduce them to the Skolos-Wedell type and image theory, in which they identify these 4 specific relationships between type and image. And then I have students look at hundreds of posters on the screen together, and we go through and we try to figure out how they were made and also place them in the Skolos-Wedell type and image theory, figure out exactly where they're situated. So this gives students a theoretical context to work against for the next step of the assignment, which is take their mood boards, and for each of these 3 ideas, expand the idea into some really specific sketches that follow the theoretical context of the type and image relationships I have just introduced them to. So their 3 ideas then becomes exponentially greater as they expand them out into a series of sketches framed by this theoretical context. And they realize they actually have a ton of ideas. And then, so that's looking at how we can, ideas about how type and image can relate. Then I need to show them, give them some more theoretical framework about ways of constructing type and image. So at this point, I introduce them to my work in book cover design, and I have a whole bunch of morphologies about how I construct type and image, and I give them a whole lecture about that, and show them the process behind several of my book cover designs. And I even open up my Lightroom and show them how each book cover, one image that gets published, comes from hundreds of iterations, and to really drive home the point that in order to come up with a great design, making 2 or 3 versions isn't enough. Like, we really have to learn how to iterate in order to come up with the best work. And so I take the examples that I show them in my process, and I structure their next step of homework around that. And I give them some really clear prompts about how to draw their next round of sketches, in which they investigate ways of constructing type and image. And I ask them, for example, to come up with an idea that uses a stock image, that uses an image they make themselves, that uses some kind of typography made outside of the computer, that uses a different material, and so on. So they have a real clear agenda. Then they are able to design their first draft of their poster series with all that ideation behind it. Then we get into the iteration phase. And here is where, depending on the time, I'll give them 3 prompts or 6 prompts. I'm going to show you 3 of my favorite prompts. The first is to take their first draft of their design and identify what elements are consistent, what elements are varying, and then swap these things. So if color is consistent in their first draft, make another iteration where color is now varying, or vice versa. Typography may change place, image, etc. And that immediately gives them a whole list of iterations to create, and it makes it very easy for them to come up with 3, 10, 20 different options, reshuffling these design elements. I'll also ask them to go back and revisit their original collage crop, because by the time we've gotten to this point, they've made 100 sketches, and that original mining for ideas image is kind of far away. So taking a look back at previous ideas is a nice prompt for another iteration. Here's another example of that, where the student revisited that original collage. And then I also try to incorporate AI as an iterative tool, because the students are going to be using AI. So let's embrace it. So I'll ask them to put in prompts so that AI does the assignment for them and see what AI comes up with. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. And then I'll ask them to take that AI influence and interpret it and design an iteration that, where they maybe make all the images themselves, but it's influenced by what the AI generator has come up with. And we can continue with myriad prompts for iteration as time permits. Another thing I like to do is have students exchange their digital files with somebody, so that there's another round of exquisite corpse where I'm working on your poster, you're working on my poster, and then we return our files, altered files to each other. I have iterative structures for semiotic revisions and typographic revisions and so on. So depending on how much time we have, I can keep going and give students all these prompts to generate many, many iterations. And the finished work then ends up surprising the students, because usually if I hadn't forced them to come up with all these ideas and all these iterations, they may have gotten an idea in their head, made a couple versions of it and called it a day. But instead, I've asked them to really get into this rich process. And so the posters that we end up with are surprising and interesting, and they do things that they didn't even realize they could. Like, this designer made all of this imagery herself. There's not one stock image in here. All the texture, everything was made on her own, custom for this project. So it's an exciting project for a new designer, graduate student changing careers. And they have several things that they can take away from it. They walk away with strategies for ideation and iteration that they can apply to any project in the future, like these tools that they can just have in their pocket at the ready. They learn the value of gamification and collaboration and surprise. They realize that they can work in what many people think is a backwards way, from form to content instead of content to form, that's absolutely doable. They learn how to structure their process around theory and morphologies, and they understand really viscerally that it's making that makes ideas. If they're stuck for an idea, they just have to make something. As long as we get started and have one thing, we can iterate that out to infinity. So they really learn this importance of, let's cast a wide net, try a lot of different things, that 2 or 3 iterations of a design is not enough. And then they take this weird, grotesque and beautiful sculptural collage with them, in which they've found minimum 20 great ideas, which could become future projects in their graduate career. One thing that the grad students really struggle with is coming up with content for themselves. So this is a gem of future ideas that they walk away with and could design websites, apps, posters, you name it, all inspired by this original collage. So that's my Mining for Ideas project. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share it with you. And I'm at 15 minutes exactly. So I will stop it here.